A vast ring of volcanic and earthquake activity stretches for 30,000 miles around the rim of the Pacific. Massive oceanic plates collide with continents in a process driven by the Earth's internal heat. This rim of fire is the home of over 3/4 of the world's active volcanoes and major earthquakes. Since the dawn of humanity, people have settled here and created great cultures in the face of almost certain disaster. This rim of fire has brought not only destruction, but also a wealth of stories and legends and beliefs. The powerful forces that shape the land also shape the lives of people who share these stories from a trembling earth. In New Zealand, the volcanoes are sacred to the native Maori people. In Los Angeles, Hollywood stories help to ease earthquake fears. In Mexico City, folk healers use ancient ways to cure the victims of earthquake trauma. And in Japan, the legendary power of Mount Fuji is celebrated with a festival of fire. Join us for these stories from the earth, this time on Fire on the Rim.
Fire on the Rim is made possible by viewers like you and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding has been provided by these Fletcher Challenge Group companies: the Fletcher Construction Company, Dinwiddie Construction Company, Pacific Construction Company, Wright Schuchart Incorporated, and Fletcher Challenge Canada.
The Rim of Fire has left its mark on many lands and people. On its southern border between the Pacific Plate and the Indo-Australian Plate lie the islands of New Zealand. A spine of volcanic formations cuts New Zealand's North Island in two. Hot springs and volcanic mountains mark the rift, as do stories and legends about the forces that form this restless land. The seismic line ends in 3 great volcanoes: Tongariro, Naruhoi, and the most massive of all, Ruapehu. An expedition on Mount Ruapehu inspired an extraordinary account by amateur volcanologist Marshall Gibby.
A tremendous experience. We were on the mountain to find out why movement was taking place in the crater. There was obviously movement in the magma, and we were up there doing a triangulation survey to find out if there was any swelling taking place in the crater area. And of course, that day we found out there was. We'd just finished the survey. It was 7 minutes to 4. I was standing there having a pipe, and I was watching the lake and puffing away on my pipe, and the bloody lake bulged. It just bulged. And I thumped Peter on the shoulder and pointed and said something completely unprintable. And out of the middle of this bulge came this silent cauliflower explosion. It just opened up in this beautiful fan. We dived for our cameras, and then all of a sudden, there was this almighty ka-thump. And out of the middle of this beautiful cauliflower came these spirals, these fingers, these violent fingers, and they just rocketed skyward. They went straight up and out, and our whole field of vision was taken up with the whole Earth just going skyward. It was incredible, incredibly violent. We immediately put Plan B into effect and dropped flat on our face, slammed our ice axes into the ice, and pulled our packs over our heads and hung on. This thing hit the crater wall seconds after we lay down. It went smack, slammed into the crater wall in front of us, howled over our heads. You could hear the boulders smashing off the tripod. They shredded the tripod. You wouldn't believe what they did to the tripod. The helicopter pilot was fueling the aircraft. He just dropped the hose, jumped into his little piston chopper, off up the hill. It took him 15 minutes to get up there. And when he rose above the canopy of cloud, he just saw devastation. There were smoking craters everywhere and the whole area was covered in ash. As he got above the rim of the crater, he said, "Oh my God." He said, "I've lost 4 blacks." And then he saw 4 little black figures dancing around, waving their hands around. And we were shell-shocked. I mean, the hydrogen sulfide and all the gases had got to us. And we were delirious going down the mountain. We had just survived the most beautiful eruption. So it was quite a day.
The awesome power Marshal Gibby faced at Ruapehu has been celebrated for centuries through the songs and legends of the native Maori people. According to one of the oldest Maori creation myths, in the beginning, the Sky Father and the Earth Mother lay so close together that no light fell between them. The two were forced apart, but within the Earth Mother, there still lies an unborn son. His subterranean restlessness causes the earth to shake and mountains to cough up fire. The Maori who live at the base of Mount Tongariro are called the Tuwharetoa people. Their song tells of the love between Mount Tongariro and a neighboring mountain. Songs and stories of the volcanoes are part of the tribal history. Some of the legends are still told in the native language. Bishop Max Mariu is a Catholic priest and a Maori schooled in the old ways. He tells the story of the first Tuwharetoa ancestor to settle near Tongariro and the story of how volcanic fire came to the mountain.
Ngā Taroirangi was the high priest on the Te Arawa canoe, and Ngā Taroirangi heard there was a great inland lake, so he came further on to find the inland lake. And he got to the taupo end, the northern end of the lake, and climbed Tauhara, and he decided he would climb Tongariro. For Ngā Taroirangi, the climbing of Tongariro was vitally important, not only for him, but for all his people. And so, if you like, he told his people to fast, to abstain, and then he started to climb the mountain.
As he was going up, Ngātaroirangi was overwhelmed by the cold, and he called to his sisters across the Pacific, the guardians of fire, to send their gift of warmth. The sisters set out underwater, carrying baskets of fire. They left one basket at Whakaari, also known as White Island. Continuing south, they traveled underground, creating a line of subterranean heat. Their path is marked with hot springs and thermal vents. Fire arrived at Tongariro just in time to revive the freezing Ngātaroirangi. Bishop Max's faith embraces both his Catholic calling and his tribal traditions.
To isolate your faith and make it something that's related only to the cathedrals in Europe is, for me, I suppose, straight out humbug. Because our cathedral is the world we live in. Our cathedral is our mountain. Our holy water is a river that runs from the mountain to the lake, from the lake down the Waikato to the sea. That's our holy water.
The mountain was once considered so holy none would climb its slopes. Rakipoho Taiaroa does climb, following in the footsteps of Ngātaroirangi, but he takes care in the ascent.
With tongariro, don't take no food up, because that's tapu or sacred. You shouldn't be eating it all up there. It's just that respect thing again. Before I go up, I always have a karakia or a prayer, just to ask the old people who have gone before me, to look after me while I'm up there.
Rake is a tribal land use planner. The first tribal plan to protect Tongariro was developed in 1886. It was proposed by Chief Tukino Teheuheu. Tukino's great-great-grandson, Tumu Teheuheu, tells the story.
In order to protect the mountain and to keep it as one, it was then decided by him and his people that it should be given to the government of New Zealand and thereby for the government to protect on behalf of the people. It was a traumatic decision to have to make. It's like a mother having to give away a child. And whilst it may seem difficult to appreciate, but when you look upon the mountains as a living being, that is what you are doing.
Rake is faced with a major challenge in planning for the use of his tribal lands. Tongariro was designated a national park and has remained a wilderness area. But neighboring Ruapehu is not fully protected. The commercialization of Ruapehu slopes raises concerns about the use of sacred lands. Should they be developed or left alone? The land use plan Rake is working out is a tricky one. It must be both economically sound and culturally sensitive.
You breathe fresh air, you see the bottom of rivers, you see life within it, not being damaged. For me, that's something really special.
For Rake, environmentalism is a modern name for the belief that underlies the old people's stories. Respect for the land.
A lot of the stories may seem far-fetched, but it's like a religion. It's like, like Christianity is. A lot of stories are far-fetched in that religion, but they seem to help a people that follow that code, and it's the same with us.
Over the years, tradition and legend have made this natural monument into a spiritual force, a symbol of the history of its people.
The mountain is sacred to me because I cannot be me without my mountain. It talks about my old people. It talks about my present situation. It talks about my future. As long as the mountain is standing, we are here.
In New Zealand, Maori legends celebrate the power of the earth. Across the Rim of Fire, another culture tells stories to distance themselves from the earth's destructive forces. Los Angeles, California lies above 3 active earthquake faults. It's one of the world's most earthquake-threatened metropolitan areas. This high-tech society produces media myths that help people cope with fears of disaster. It's a fate not everyone wants to accept.
I don't really believe that there's going to be a real big shakeup. We don't expect it. You don't think about it.
I don't know, kind of looking forward to it. It'll probably be pretty sharp.
Most residents know they're on shaky ground, but like their counterparts around the rim of fire, many Los Angelinos enjoy the good life too much to leave.
I love LA. I love living here, and I don't think that's going to make me leave.
The lifestyle is too attractive to worry about, just something that happens very infrequently.
In LA, some people feel it's more comfortable to ignore the earthquake threat than to think about it. That sort of denial is familiar to psychologist Donald Hiroto.
If you look around, residents of California, or of Southern California, really act as if nothing's going to happen. And interesting, that's precisely the operation that helps people to cope with dangerous times like this. There is a form of denial that's called illusion of invulnerability, which means that there is a belief and a feeling that in a dangerous world, nothing will happen to you.
I'm Jack Popejoy with the KFWB Great Quake Quiz.
For commuters stuck in traffic, radio shows like the Great Quake Quiz are another way to cope. In the wide community of the airwaves, they share earthquake stories, fears, and expertise.
And this hour, we start with the question phoned in by Lola in El Monte. When we have a great earthquake, she wonders, will the ground actually open up in places?
Hollywood draws on these deep-seated fears, making the celluloid stories people pay money to see. Earthquake, the movie, was a popular disaster film in the 70s. The movie was such a success that studio tour executives decided to take the next technological leap in storytelling.
Well, now what we're going to do is take you into our newest soundstage. It's soundstage number 50. Now, currently they're dressing the entire area up for a brand new motion picture shoot. It's a new episode of Columbo, and they're going to make it into a 2-hour television movie. Now, most of the action will be taking place off to the driver's side. Down those stairs, the actors are going to come. Whoa! Okay, folks, it's just a small California quake. Hey, watch it on the driver's side. The ceiling's falling. Whoa, there goes a truck! There goes a truck! Uh-oh. It sounds like a train is coming in from the station on the driver's side. Watch it, there it is! Watch out, guys, on over water! Hang on! Well, what did you guys think of it? Did you like it? Well, you guys just survived our newest animation entitled Earthquake, the Big One.
Studio executive Ron Benson is pleased with the response.
The reaction by our visitors is spectacular. It's getting the highest ratings of any element we've had here at the tour. Our attendance has come up considerably since the attraction opened, and we consider it a huge success.
But why does Hollywood make such big box office dollars telling blockbuster stories from the Earth? It may be that earthquake entertainment is a way of processing unspoken fears about uncontrollable experiences.
It tends to externalize one's fears. It tends to provide some mastery over one's fears. It also tends to address itself to the illusion of invulnerability, that disasters always happen to someone else, never to you.
At Universal, earthquake entertainment can be a way to master earthquake fears for a price. Selling earthquake mementos is big business. Universal even provides an earthquake soothsayer.
I am Nostradamus. I am the one who predicted all the tragedies and floods and fires and the earthquake you are going to see.
The writings of the real Nostradamus, a 14th century philosopher, were interpreted to predict a huge earthquake in Los Angeles in May of 1988. That myth died when the appointed time came and went. Now Universal's character foretells that visitors will experience the big one.
I predict you will see it within the next hour. Yes, I know.
For LA residents who prefer science to fiction, Caltech seismologist Kate Hutton watches the earthquake patterns in Southern California. On a quiet day, 20 to 30 tremors show up on the instruments.
The most likely scenario, we think, is the San Andreas Fault producing a magnitude 8-ish earthquake. Probably within our lifetime, more likely than not within the next 30 years or so.
One of the largest recent quakes in the LA area measured 6.5 on the Richter scale. That was in 1971. Most of the damage was in the western San Fernando Valley. Hutton projects that when the big one strikes, 10,000 people could die, and thousands more would suffer loss. Laughter is one way to bring the threat down to a manageable size.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Tamayo Otsugi.
Before I come to California, a friend of mine told me, don't you get scared because California have all those earthquakes. And I said, earthquake? Why do I have to worry about that? Why do I have to get scared? I have been living in a neighbor with Godzilla for 15 years. We can laugh at something a little too close to us, or farther than that, but it's like real threat in the back of our minds. Sometimes I don't think it's funny.
Earthquakes. How many people out here, how many native Californians do you have out here? I'm here to tell you visitors that earthquakes are no big deal. You Californians go through a tornado sometime. You'll get religion. And it won't be est. You don't just acknowledge a tornado. It's like, deal with it, Dorothy.
People laugh at earthquake jokes because laughing at the uncontrollable is perhaps the most therapeutic way to deal with the uncontrollable.
These earthquakes are nothing more than, ooh, we moved and we didn't mean to.
You can turn to God or you can turn to comedians. And the difference is that God will never let you down. Comics have off nights, you know.
Now we know exactly what to do. Californians know what to do during an earthquake. We jump out of bed, we feel the ground shake, we jump out of bed, we go over, we turn on the news, and we see if the anchor man is underneath the dam.
Psychologist Hiroto sees the therapeutic effect of earthquake jokes.
Humor is certainly a way of reducing tension. It's a way of addressing one's fears. It's a way of objectifying fears and making it more manageable.
I'm Jack Popejoy with the KFWB Great Quake Quiz. One of the biggest problems we hear about is what psychologists call denial.
What do you do with a lady who is absolutely so paranoid about earthquakes she turns the volume off on the radio when you mention the word earthquake?
It seems very clear one of the ways to deal with earthquake phobia is simply to fight it with information. The more you know, the less afraid you are.
Some of Popejoy's listeners disagree with his rational approach.
I get threats. People call up and say, instead of talking about earthquakes, you should be getting everyone to pray against them. You're bringing earthquakes on by talking about them. You shouldn't talk about them.
Tomorrow we'll begin answering
But talking about earthquakes is exactly what Popejoy intends to do.
When we get people to understand what earthquakes are about, how to react to them, how to survive them, that's the highest and best use of the medium of broadcasting that I can think of.
Hey, welcome to my quakey shaky van. I'm Yogi. You're better than the average earthquake-prepared bear.
Another media personality is trying to educate the children of Los Angeles. Hanna-Barbera Productions has cooperated with the LA County Fire Department by providing Yogi Bear for their quakey shaky schoolhouse.
So are you guys ready for a demonstration?
Yeah! Now, if you look up, you'll notice there's two shelves above. On one side, there's some familiar toys held in place by a safety wire. On the other side, they are sitting there unprotected. Now here comes the quakey shaky part. Ready? There's one simple rule. Just stay cool. That shook me up pretty good. How about you? Well, that's what a real earthquake kind of feels like. So remember, take care and prepare. And don't forget to get my booklet and tell your family and friends all about being earthquake prepared.
Yogi Bear is a hit with Ruth Nettlehorst's 4th grade class. These kids haven't yet developed the coping strategies of adults. Their fears are very much on the surface.
What I want you to do is just raise your hands if you have something you want to say or a question that you have.
I'm afraid of an earthquake. That's because I'm afraid like the ground would crack and you just, in your house or you would just sink down the ground and all the stuff would just fall on top of your head and break.
Remember earlier in the year when we talked about all this and we said that that's pretty rare that the ground will just open up and swallow you up?
I'm afraid of earthquakes because I'm afraid I'm going to die in one. Because I saw a movie about it and I'm afraid it's going to start fires and stuff and I'm going to be caught in it.
So what's the best thing that we can do?
Duck and cover.
Earthquake, drop.
Los Angeles is a fast-paced, modern society. People here gather some of their stories from nightclubs and the silver screen. But high-tech stories can serve the same purpose as the older stories from the earth. They help Los Angelinos prepare emotionally for the inevitable, unpredictable disaster to come. While Los Angeles waits, others have already suffered from the trauma of a violent earth. The people of Mexico have found comfort in their own stories and beliefs. The slopes of a volcano shadow the ancient city of Teotihuacan. Pyramids were aligned with sacred points on its peak. The great civilizations of the Valley of Mexico respected the power of the earth. At least 3 times each century, volcanoes and earthquakes cause misery in Mexico. An ancient calendar stone refers to the Aztec belief that the world would end in a cataclysmic quake. And for thousands of Mexicans, it did, adding more tragic stories of the earth to a long tradition.
There was so much happening. I won't say I'm brave. I was frightened, very frightened, but I tried to stay calm. We cut the electricity to prevent an explosion, and I was shouting, "Let me back in there because my baby, she's still alive."
Centuries of fearful events have led Mexicans to a unique way of coping with trauma. A set of ancient folkways that still thrive despite the advance of the modern world. Today, the heart of the Valley of Mexico holds the 2nd most populated urban area in the world. To escape the stress of city life, some people use geologic activity to their advantage at volcanic hot springs and mud baths, where the Earth's power is benign. But every Mexico City resident can expect at least once in his life to experience the terror of a catastrophic earthquake. This generation's turn came in 1985. On September 19th, during the morning news, broadcasters struggled to remain calm as the studio shook with increasing intensity.
Sigue temblando un poquitito, pero pues vamos a tomarlo con una gran tranquilidad. Vamos a esperar un segundo para poder hablar.
For 2.5 dreadful minutes, the Earth inspired terror.
To know that something like an earthquake can happen and you can be left dead on the street made me afraid to go out.
Leticia Valdez was one of the terrified thousands.
I started to have all the symptoms of insecurity and fear of the night. I'd go to bed and wake up screaming, thinking everything was shaking again. I lost my appetite and became very nervous.
Psychologist Rolando Collado says the reaction was typical.
In my opinion, what happens during a phenomenon as serious as this one is that man, any human being, becomes aware of his smallness, of his weakness, and of the ease with which he can lose his life.
Dr. Collado and his colleagues established emergency mental health clinics to help people cope with their terror and grief. But many Mexicans weren't healed by conventional medicine or psychology. Leticia's doctor couldn't treat her anxiety, so she returned to the familiar, brightly painted home of Conchita Martinez, the neighborhood curandera, a folk healer. Leticia's first visit was after the '85 quake. Now she's back because another tremor has shaken the city and her fragile psyche. Leticia's mother tells the story of how the latest quake has caused a recurrence of symptoms from the '85 disaster: loss of appetite, sleep, and sometimes speech. Conchita says that the problem must again be susto, an illness caused by a great fright that makes the soul leave the body. Conchita will call upon 7 generations of family knowledge to cure Leticia's susto. In a back room, fragrant with exotic herbs, Conchita sets about to restore Leticia's frightened soul. The curandera believes her healing powers are a gift from God. But she draws upon knowledge that originated long before the conquistadors imported Christianity. The idea of a village wise woman dates back to the Aztecs. Her most important qualification was a healing spirit. With fire and herbs, Conchita performs a cleansing to clear out any bad spirits that may have entered Leticia's body. Eggs symbolize the victim's lost soul. Tenderly, Conchita prepares to restore what the earthquake has frightened away. To the skeptic, the curandera ceremony may seem like some sort of occult magic, but many find its effectiveness startling. Dr. Collado says that earthquake victims with susto flooded the clinics.
Most of those sick with susto, which we studied, thought that they had lost their soul. We studied 100 who were sick, 50 with susto, and 50 similar cases who had not suffered susto. My medical impression, much to my surprise, was that the folks with susto were quite sick organically and had a variety of pathological disorders.
Subsequent studies have shown that in Mexico, healers like Conchita are often more successful at curing trauma-induced illness than those equipped with the tools of modern medicine. As a result, scientists are trying to understand how this ritual works. Anthropologist Art Rubel and Luis Vargas are interested in how folk healing works, and this place offers clues from the past. It is an ancient lava flow, excavated to uncover the ceremonial site it destroyed. The ruins of Quiquilco offer insight into ancient psychology.
You can imagine the fear and the impression that those people must have had.
The sense of the power of the earth and the power of the natural elements.
In the pre-Hispanic times, people had the idea that there was something in the earth that could take away everything. What we call the earth monster.
The earth lord and the lord of the volcano and the strong, potent forces in the environment. Those are the forces which take the soul of Indian peasants.
In a trance, Leticia is ready to get her soul back.
Leticia! No dije que abriera los ojos. Vuelve en ti.
Conchita touches her reassuringly, gaining her trust so the soul will come back. This continues until Leticia begins to relax. At last, Conchita pronounces a cure.
Ella está curada.
But these are urban women, not Indian peasants. Why haven't these ancient beliefs paled against the gleam of modern medicine?
That's a very interesting question, because in Mexico City and in most of the large cities of Mexico, we look very modern. But you must remember that for most of us, we are second and third generation urban dwellers. And in every family, you will find that a grandmother, an aunt, or an uncle, or somebody will know how to deal with diseases with the traditional ways.
In the evening, people with a variety of ills gather in Conchita's living room. Some are referred by Dr. Roberto Campos, a local family practitioner. For 10 years, he's marveled at the healing he has seen here.
I think what I've learned from Conchita is how she treats her patients, the closeness she creates with them, and how she allows them to talk about their problems.
For generations, Conchita's family has patiently listened to stories of fear, but after the '85 quake, they were overwhelming.
We had such misfortune here that most people were trapped in hospitals, in houses. All those were dazed. Everyone was frightened. Thousands were affected. And now we see unfolding some diseases that are very rare in our Mexico, because after susto, because of susto, there are many illnesses of the body.
In 1985, as the body count climbed, so did symptoms of survivors. Some Mexican physicians began to suspect that what folk healers called susto, psychologists called by other names.
Certainly susto has to do with trauma and post-traumatic stress. Remember that at the time, you could say that every Mexican family knew of or knew somebody who had died in the earthquake. I mean, all of us had grief.
What we've discovered, as sort of as a social science point of view, is that people who tend to suffer susto are people who fail to meet their own role expectations. People who found themselves, for example, outside their apartment house with other members of the family inside, but unable to get to the people who are crying out for help. It's classic for Susto from a scientific point of view.
Nightmarish memories can haunt anyone who lives through a major earthquake. But in Mexico, traumatized souls are restored through empathy and understanding.
It's a very moving experience when you watch a curer and a patient together calling the soul back. What they will tend to do is to try to recapitulate the event that caused the soul to leave the body in the first place. What psychiatrists call an abreaction.
Anita!
To startle the public, that's to say, to create, a good susto, a harmless susto, in which, as you're scared on purpose by the curandero, your soul will come back. It's a good susto that will restore things back to normal.
Respire hondo. Respire hondo, por favor.
Curandero knows exactly which strings to pull in order to bring things back to normal. This is something that Western medicine has to relearn from curanderos. They have what you would call in English better bedside manners, in the sense that they really know how to deal with the intimate problems of their patients.
A week after visiting Conchita, Leticia says her fears have faded. Her appetite has returned. Her apathy has vanished. The frightened victim is once again a functioning member of society. Mexico City is rebuilding again, as it always has. And its people repair their damaged psyches against a backdrop of tragic reminders. In a park built to commemorate the dead, life goes on. But every citizen bears the knowledge that his or her life could shake apart again. Perhaps in 50 years, perhaps in 2. Earthquakes are inevitable in Mexico. But from this never-ending cycle of fearful events has come a cure for shaken souls, as ancient as a people's experience with an unpredictable earth. In Mexico, the trembling earth brings destruction and great fear. Across the rim of fire, centuries of volcanic eruptions have inspired the people of Japan to revere one volcano above all others, Fuji. Fuji's name comes from an ancient word for fire. More than 1,000 years ago, when Fuji erupted regularly, a Japanese poet described the mountain. The clouds of heaven dare not cross it, nor the birds of the air soar above it. The snows quench the burning fires. The fires consume the falling snow. It baffles the tongue. It cannot be named. It is a god, mysterious. The volcano last erupted in 1707. As that memory fades, the volcano's spiritual power wanes as well. Yet remnants of the ancient devotion endure. Each year, at the end of August, a bonfire festival celebrates Fuji and its primary deity, the goddess Konohana Sakuya Hime. According to legend, Konohana, trapped in her burning home, gave birth to a boy, unscathed by the flames. The festival promotes fertility and prevention of fire. Kiyoshige Ida is the leader of the Maruto Miyamoto Fujiko group, which worships the mountain. The believers pray for good health and prosperity. And Ida-san remembers the story told by his father about sensing the presence of the goddess Konohana on Mount Fuji.
My father came to a place called Sunabashiri. and right behind him, he saw a young woman. Her hair was so long, it almost reached her waist. She was wearing the sort of kimono a princess would wear. And she came sweeping down the hill behind him. My father felt that she didn't seem like any ordinary person. There was something strange about her. After he came to the foot of the mountain, he met the owner of a pilgrim's lodging house, who was a Shinto priest. The priest said the woman must have been Konohana Sakuya Hime. I myself have never experienced anything like that. It seems like in the old days they had more unusual things happening.
Inspired by stories like this, Ida-san's group maintains the old traditions. And once a year, they make a pilgrimage up the sacred mountain. The pilgrims chant the Rokan Shoujo. May our six senses be pure, and may the weather on the holy peak be fine. Ida-san first climbed the volcano when he was 7 years old. Since then, he's climbed 146 more times. It's a journey of will, of meditation, and of cooperative effort.
We climb in a group, but those who come alone and are exhausted, we let them come into our group and we help them reach the summit. I have to admit, it gives me great joy.
The path was once crowded with pilgrims in white robes.
The mountain used to be a religious mountain, but now it's become a mountain for recreation. Things have really changed.
Ida-san still purifies the air with flint and prays to Fuji every morning. Organized devotion to Fuji became popular in the years after the volcano's eruption in the 18th century. Ida-san's family traces its lineage back to those early disciples, and his family crest bears the mark of the mountain. Early followers worshiped the active volcano as a god of material abundance. They elevated Konohana, princess of the flowering tree blossoms, to supreme deity of the mountain. New adherents flocked to the religion. Their main devotion was to climb the sacred peak. But not everyone could afford the 3-day journey from Tokyo, and women and children were not allowed on Fuji's holy soil. Fuji replicas were built in the city, so everyone could make the ritual ascent. On the first day of Fuji's climbing season, Ida-san's group treks up one of Tokyo's 50 miniature volcanoes. The zigzag path mimics the 99 turns of the actual ascent. At the height of Fujiko's popularity, hundreds of religious groups would have observed the opening day traditions. Like the ritual procession through the grass hoop, which symbolizes rebirth and purification. Today, for most people, the ceremonies are simply a neighborhood celebration. the Fujiko sect has dwindled to a handful of followers, but it is part of a much larger cultural reverence for the volcano.
There is only one mountain, Mount Fuji, that the Japanese people have painted again and again since the olden days.
Art historian Fujio Naruse notes that for centuries, thousands of Japanese artists and poets have created works in praise of the mountain. Over the years, Fuji has become one of the most recognizable symbols of Japan. But as more people have adopted the mountain for their own, it has lost some of its sacred quality. Each year, over 1 million people begin the 12,000-foot climb to the summit. On August 8, 1988, the winding path was unusually crowded. For Buddhists, the number 8 is a sign of good luck. Some people climbed through the night to arrive at the summit at 8:08 on 8/8/88. Fuji's beauty and majestic presence draw hundreds of people to its summit each hour of the climbing season. For these modern pilgrims, Fuji is no god. Nonetheless, lingering associations make reaching the summit a spiritual journey. The modern world meets the old religion in the great community celebration held at Fuji's base each August. Ida-san and the Fujiko follow Shinto priests to the shrine of Konohana. The ceremonies mark the descent of the goddess from Fuji's summit. Now, at the end of the summer, the priests will accompany Konohana's spirit out of the shrine and back down the mountainside. Once the spirit enters the Fuji replica, the ceremony falls into the hands of the villagers. In the village below, preparations take place for the bonfire. At last, the Fuji shrine arrives, and Ida-san prepares to light the first pyre. Once again, the yearly rituals are complete. But Ida-san worries about the future. He's afraid the Fujiko will perish in 20 to 30 years.
The rituals, the prayers, the daily routines, there may be no one left who can do these things. We feel sad to lose them.
For the Japanese people, the slumbering volcano now signifies peace and stability. But someday, the volcano will reassert its power, reminding its people of nature's awesome ability to give and to take away. Towering volcanoes and the trembling earth have given birth to stories and legends and sacred beliefs. From generation to generation, these tales and practices have comforted, inspired, entertained, and enriched the lives of those who dwell on the rim of fire.